Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Glad you're here with us. As you probably know, as I hope you know, St. John's has a long history of doing work in and around the Roanoke Valley. And if you read this month's record, you know that we are in the process of a name change, changing what we have called in the past our outreach ministries to community engagement. The reason for that is severalfold, but in part, outreach means that we are going out. It tends to come from a charity model. The reality is that we are part of this valley, we are part of where we sit, and we get just as much out of the work that we do with others. And so we're changing that to kind of adopt a different ministry model. Along with that, we're taking a look at the ministries that we have here at St. John's currently. And so we're thrilled to have Dr. Paula Prince here with us this morning to talk about homelessness in the area. Dr. Prince is the chair of the Blue Ridge Interagency Council on Homelessness. So for the next 45 minutes, I hope that you'll sit back and listen to what she has to say. She knows a lot about this issue. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Can everybody hear me? I hate to use the mic, and I can be much louder if I need. I have 4 children. That is not a problem. As mentioned, I'm the chair of the Interagency Council on Homelessness. We provide oversight to the continuum of care. Every municipality in the United States that has that receives HUD funding from the feds has to have a continuum of care, which includes, and I'll talk about that in a sec, includes service providers, etc. And we are the oversight group for the continuum of care. We set policy for how those HUD funds are to be expended in dealing with just homelessness. Other HUD funds, other funds, someone else has to worry about. So that is our role. And you'll notice this, it looks complicated. This is our system. The dark purple circle, I'm not pointing, there. These are the things that the BRIC does. We do a ranking of applications for money. We engage we have community engagement. We do a point in time survey. We oversee the ZOC, but we have, these are the pieces of our system, and I know it was complicated. We'll mostly be talking about those people who are members of the COC, Continuum of Care, the service providers. One of the things I really want to point out is that this is a map of the area we cover. Please note the size of the Blue Ridge area. You hear a lot of complaints in the community about why do people who are homeless come to Roanoke? Why doesn't Botetourt do something? Why doesn't Craig do something? This is our area. It goes from extremely urban here in Roanoke City to very, very rural. It would make no economic sense at all to build a shelter in Craig County for 2 people or 1 person. We don't have that kind of money. So for economies of scale and being able to provide services that are appropriate, one of the issues certainly is for folks to come to Roanoke. So think about this map when you hear people complain about, well, why is everybody coming to Roanoke? Because this is our whole area. Our continuum of care has the mission to ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. This is an extremely lofty goal. It is, however, with the correct policies and initiatives, it is doable. Probably never end homelessness totally, but certainly we can make a dent in it. So what does being homeless mean? Using the HUD definition, a person is homeless if they lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And if that nighttime residence is a supervised, publicly or privately operated shelter designed to provide temporary living arrangements. The rescue mission, for example, is one of those. It's also an institution that provides, again, a temporary residence for individuals intended to be institutionalized, city jail, substance abuse emergency programs, mental health facilities. Again, these are temporary. And then those who are living outside in places that are not designed for people to live. These are the folks that you see out on the sidewalks or under bridges or out by, various interchanges, places around there. But it also means, and this is important, it means people who are living doubled up with friends and relatives. This is particularly interesting when you look at the data. Among the Spanish-speaking community in the Roanoke Valley, you find almost no people who are either living on the street or at the shelters. They double up. They take in their friends and family if they run into some issues. You don't find them in the shelters. Very, very few. And I, in fact, can say that when we last, in the winter point in time count, out of the 216 people that were homeless, only 4 identified themselves as being Latinx. But it also means living in motels, not otherwise considered a welfare hotel. So an example of that is the Ramada that just got torn down, which was not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. And also those women who are living in secure domestic violence shelters who, while they may have a home, cannot go to that home. They are in danger if they do. So we have, and certainly I'll talk about this in a minute, we have had a significant rise in the number of women who are domestic violence victims. I should say survivors. This is the stereotype. These are the people that we think are homeless. Again, the people, during about this time last year, there was an initiative that was led by a lot of the people who live downtown to have an ordinance for people not to sleep on the street because there were, significant issues with that happening. So these were the folks that ordinance was targeted against. They have not gone away. They've just moved out of downtown. So who's homeless? Every winter, if you are a community that receives HUD funding, the 3rd week in January, we do what's called a point in time survey. This is done across the country. Every HUD funded community is doing a point in time that same week. And we've been doing one for, goodness, 20 years. On January the 26th, 2022, we had 216 people who were experiencing homelessness. 178 were in shelters. They were out either at Family Promise, or they were at the Rescue Mission, or they were at Arch, but they were not outside. 38 people were counted as unsheltered. We go out about 4 o'clock in the morning, and the physician assistant students at RUC make up the bulk of the folks who are counting those folks who are unsheltered. And we do that particularly because by the time at this point in their education, they've learned how to do self-help assessments. And we like for them to do it so if they run across someone who needs immediate referral to the emergency room or medical care, they can tag those folks and are more likely to understand what's going on. And through the years, we have had several people who likely would have died if they had not have gotten immediate medical assistance So we use, physician assistant students. Shamefully, we make them get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out and help us and do surveys. Why January? Well, in January, those folks who are unsheltered are less, those unsheltered folks are less likely to be where they can't be found. Because in the winter, several of our programs have I don't want to say they loosen their restrictions, but they make sure that people are not out on nights where it's below freezing. So we get a fairly accurate count. This year, the 38 people who were unsheltered, we found almost no one downtown. That was certainly because of the ordinance. They had moved out of downtown and they're still there, again, 38 people. They were out in the county, they were out by Crossroads Mall, they were out and about. If you're really interested in where they were, I can get the data for you to pinpoint, but I'm sure you know where they were too. If you look at the subpopulation, 148 people were in adult only of the people we counted, adult only households. There were 30 people who were in families with children. And those we count children as no surprise, those under 18. 19 of the people that we found were military veterans. 37 individuals were considered chronically homeless. And I'll talk a minute about being chronically homeless. There were 10 unaccompanied homeless youth between the ages of 18 and 24 years. They are particularly hard to serve in the sense that they're very often, if they're unaccompanied, it's often because they have had to leave home because of problems with their parents, or they've aged out of foster care. Some of the problems may be because they're LGBTQ youth who are unwelcome at home anymore. So there are no particular programs at the moment that directly serve 18 to 24-year-olds, but they are definitely out there. We have had, certainly we've had successes. We've almost 62% of the number of people, we've reduced homelessness overall 62% since 2012. Back in 2012, we had 500 and some people who were counted on the night of the point in time count. We've reduced veterans homelessness by 74%. Part of that is about, I think it's been 6 or 7 years ago, there was a national initiative to reduce homeless veterans who were homeless to zero. We'll never get to zero, but certainly we've significantly reduced the number of our military veterans who are homeless. We've had an 82% reduction in chronic homelessness. And chronically homeless are those people who are particularly difficult to serve. There's a formal definition. These are people with a disability, and that can be mental health or substance abuse or physical disability, and have been homeless for a year or over 4 occasions over 3 years without a break, or that they've been institutionalized in a jail, in a mental health facility, in substance abuse treatment programs for less than 90 days. These are folks with co-occurring things. They're very often, as I say, they have probably been in jail, and I'll point out that if you have had a have a felony on your record, you are ineligible for a significant number of federal government programs, public housing, WIC, TANF, Section 8. You're not eligible for any of those. So interaction with the criminal justice system is a huge barrier for some of our people, and that account for chronic homelessness. There was one year when in the winter, everyone we counted who was out on the street, save one, had some interaction with the criminal justice system. which was a significant finding for us. In, I don't know why I do that, but in January, again, we had 38 people who were living on the street. I have information for 37 of them for some reason. One person I have no information for, but no surprise, they're most likely men, but there were 10 women who were living on the street also. 21 white, 14 black, 2 biracial, 2 identified as Hispanic. Now, again, this was unsheltered. 2 of the 37 identified as military veterans, and 11 of those were the chronically homeless that I just described. Again, very, very difficult to serve. So why were they homeless? I don't know if you can read this. The most likely reason is this past January, they were domestic violence survivors. During COVID, we had a significant increase in the number of women who reported being survivors of domestic violence and in immediate danger, to the point that it significantly strained our ability to serve them. And we tend to serve them, the 2 programs that serve particularly domestic violence victims are Salvation Army Turning Point, which is a secure shelter, the only one in the area. And then also TAP Women's Center also housed a significant number of these women during COVID. But there was a huge increase. If you look certainly on the list of things that people said was the cause of their homelessness, certainly lack of financial resources and the lack of affordable housing show up in several different ways, plus substandard housing, utility shut off. You're evicted if you have no heat. You cannot live in a place with no heat or water. So a lot of the things, while they're not particularly directed at housing, are housing. The fair market rent in Roanoke is $990 for 2 bedrooms. The disability income, Social Security disability income, is $841. So with disability, you don't have enough to pay the rent, much less any of your other expenses. In Virginia, the minimum wage is $11. You'd have to work for 60 hours in a week to afford an affordable 2-bedroom dwelling. That being said, we're short about 3,570 affordable dwellings. We do not have affordable housing, and that's for many reasons, but we just do not have it. The housing that's being built tends to be market rate or above, and folks who are on disability or on minimum wage really cannot afford those. So if you know you're looking for some place to advocate for affordable housing, that's one of our biggest goals, certainly. HUD does not require that we do this, but we decided quite some time ago that we were going to do the same point in time survey in July. So we do it the 3rd week of July. Why do it in the summer? Well, people are far more likely to be willing to stay outside in the summer because it's not freezing. This is not rocket science. Very often people think that living outside in the summer is not too onerous. You know, we go camping, they say. Unfortunately, living outside in the summer is every bit as dangerous as living outside in the winter. The dangers are just different. People who live in some of the places you've seen them fall victim to horrendous insect bites, sunstroke. It is not easier to live outside in the summer. But we decided, since we're more likely to find those that are unsheltered, we do a second point in time count. And so this past July, it was on July the 20th. We found 178 people sheltered, about the same folks who had been sheltered before. Not necessarily the same, but the same categories. But we found 91 people unsheltered, which was absolutely stunning for us. We had not expected that at all. In 2019, we found 39 in the summer. We did not do one in 2020 because of COVID. COVID was COVID. Last year, 2021, we found 46. And this year we found 91 people who were living outside. Were the reasons for why, they were homeless different? No, they were basically the same reasons that the winter folks were homeless. And this, as I say, this is among the unsheltered. Unsheltered have there's some summer health issues. Of those that we found, 19 had tested positive for COVID-19. But 66% of our homeless folks, this is good news. 66% of the folks that we counted in the summer had at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. About 71% have health insurance. This is an important data point because we assume that folks don't have health insurance, but the Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid in Virginia has made a huge difference in the number of people who are able to access health care. So we were happy to see that number. The challenges that folks face who are unsheltered are immense. I mentioned the deficit of about 300 affordable housing units. So not having a place to go is certainly number one. People are homeless because they don't have a home. Developing rapport and trust takes a great deal of time. The folks who are outside don't trust any of us. They don't trust the police. They don't trust mental health workers. They don't trust any of us. And a lot of that is justified. There has not necessarily been in their lives reasons to trust. So it takes a long time for city HAT team. The Blue Ridge Healthcare has a street outreach team. It takes more than one time talking to somebody. It may take 10 times showing up with a cup of coffee or just a kind word before someone is willing to say, okay, tell me how you can help me. Again, service hesitation and resistance. Unsheltered people don't want to go to the shelters for various reasons. Those folks who have mental health issues very often are very uncomfortable in congregate living arrangements. Those of you who, lived in a dorm in college and had 2 or 3 roommates, think about what that was like. You were really happy not to have them after a while. Folks who have mental health issues find this dangerous. They find them loud and scary, and they would just as soon sleep under a tree at 30 degrees than to go to a shelter. There's also certainly the system provides all sorts of hang-ups. Anybody who's tried, I spent an hour and a half the other day on a hold listening to awful music to get something done. And I can deal with this. I mean, this just our system itself puts these little roadblocks in it. The other thing we have really run into is staff burnout, and lack of people to do the work that we need to have done. And I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about COVID. We do not have enough people who are case managers. One of the biggest chances of success for someone who's homeless, especially if you're chronically homeless or have special needs, is to have case management. I would call out Family Promise. Certainly, they have an excellent case management program that follows people even after they've been housed. You can't just house somebody and then go away and say, see you, bye. Good luck. You've now got someplace. A lot of these folks have issues that need to be followed. And so case management is important, but we don't have them. They're either, programs are either underfunded and can't afford to hire them, or there's no one that wants the job to start with. And that was certainly true through COVID. Certainly challenges with providing services. And again, when I talk about disabilities, we certainly could use more substance abuse programs. There just are not enough for those folks to get substance abuse care when they are at the point that they will accept it. This is the thing, if you, a friend of mine used to be part of a program that, at Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care that provided substance abuse care for women, when they found out they were pregnant. And one of the things she would often say is that, if I could get this woman into care on this minute, when she is most willing to go because she has now found out she's pregnant, her chances are great. But if she has to wait 3 months, forget it. She's gone. And this is true for all of our folks. It's a mindset. You have to be in the mood to do this. And as a former smoker, although not for 30 years, you have to want to do this and to get the right help at the right time. And then came COVID. This was really a wake-up call for us, and I think it was for our whole community. We did not have a system in place to deal with the pandemic. Like, who did it? I'm not faulting any place, but we just didn't. But it significantly showed the hole in our healthcare provider system in several different ways. But we were forced to deal, with people who were homeless and could have COVID. So through April 2020 and through June 21, we served 269 people and exited 99 to permanent housing. While doing that, we had isolation for COVID positive people, their close contacts, and people who were symptomatic. ARCH did 102 folks, and the Council of Community Services did 46. That was unbelievably difficult. We had our folks, we rented hotel rooms, budget in, and I'm blocking that there was another place. But there was no supervision for these folks, particularly at these hotels. We had to get transportation for them, which was almost impossible. We had to provide food for them 3 times a day, which was also a huge problem. There was difficulty. There was no way to actually quarantine people. I mean, we can't force people not to talk to each other. There was no surprise. You send a bunch of people to go live in a hotel, tell them they can't leave. Various deviant behavior, which caused all kinds of issues. I mean, it was incredibly difficult. We did, however, do it. We managed to pull this off, and we have learned an enormous amount. We are ready for the next pandemic. And I will say, when I talk about system failure, we had a lot of money. The feds gave us a bucket load of money. It didn't provide staff money. We had it to pay them. There were no people. So when we were trying to bring meals out to these hotels, we had money to pay for them. We had no one that wanted to go deliver them. Case managers did not want to case manage people who might have COVID or had COVID. They did not want to put themselves, and we didn't want to put them in danger either. So one of the issues we often say, well, if we had more money, well, sure, if you've got money, this is good, but there also has to be a structure in place that can use that money appropriately and to spend it on the things you really need to spend it on in the way you need to spend it. We learned how to do that. As I said, we're ready, bring it on. If Matt Cruikshank here, he will shoot me. We had vaccination clinics. We had, in partnership, certainly the health department was terrific during this. We had on-site vaccination clinics at the head office, which is the homeless assistance team. They are run by the city. And at Ram House, we have ongoing vaccination at Fralin Clinic. I can't say enough about the rescue mission. When they opened their clinic some years ago, the number of people who were experiencing homelessness who got all their health care in the emergency room was enormous. And that dropped when they opened the Fraley Clinic, there, even with the most rudimentary health, care, the number of people who went to the emergency room dropped by 50%, which was huge because emergency room care is exceedingly expensive for the hospital and the community. We have a level 1 trauma center, which means that they have to be ready for anything, anytime, and that's very expensive. So the Fraley Clinic has been unbelievably helpful for our population. They also continue to do testing and again providing vaccinations. So a lot of the COVID related health challenges we were able to take care of without, well, I shouldn't say without too much trouble, but we were able to deal with those. We had more trouble with case management and housing than anything else. The challenges we face, certainly developing the strategies, because again, we've not done this before. Staffing shortages, we've had incredible high rates of turnover. The other issue we certainly ran into, and we continue to, is the number of people who are experiencing mental health crises. And that has been the case, I think, in many populations, not just the homeless. COVID really laid bare mental health problems that people maybe were able to cope with or whatever, but COVID really put a dent in our ability to deal with that. Increased substance abuse. You hear people say, those people who are not homeless, things like, well, boy, during COVID, when I was in lockdown, I had wine every day. I started at 2 o'clock. Substance abuse did go up because we were all just sort of trapped. Inflation has hit us hard. The Rescue Mission was planning on doing several different renovation projects. I've had to put some of it on hold for a little bit because the price of the products to do these things like tile for the floor suddenly is way out of budget. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the rise in the cost of housing itself. Again, I mentioned housing and the fact that we have no housing to start with, expensive or otherwise. So we certainly did have challenges. I included, again, a shout out to the Fraley Clinic. You'll notice that, I don't know if you can see, but these are Fraley medical street outreach. One of the things that people who are living on the street often have wounds that are significantly more serious than they would be if you or I had them and just pop by our local urgent care when we first got them. So I include these photographs as a shout out to them. Kind of to give you an idea about, what programs are doing what, about half of our people are served, our population are served by the Rescue Mission, and they have several different programs. They have emergency shelter. They have a couple of substance abuse programs. They have a women and children's program, and they are doing going into some transitional housing also. Our quarantine shelter, these are both motels, took care of about 9%, as did the Arch programs. Arch, if you're not familiar, is the trust house on Elm Avenue. They changed their names, not unusual. The domestic violence shelters had about 7%. Family Promise, which is a very small but very particular program. You all, I think, here at St. John's are familiar with Family Promise because you posted their folks. They had about 4% of our population. Again, a very specific, they seem small, but theirs is very specific. We also have the homeless assistance team. The homeless assistance team provides street outreach. They're part of the city. The things that the continuum of care services, again, the street outreach, emergency and transitional shelter programs, meals. One of the interesting things is if you see people who are asking you for money because they're hungry, there are 4 places to eat if you want to eat there for free. You can have breakfast at the rescue mission, you can have lunch at Ram, or you can have lunch at Samaritan Inn, and then you can go back to the mission and have supper. So basically, you can have 4 meals a day at no cost to you. So one of the, the I'm hungry, well, it certainly tugs on heartstrings. It's not necessarily an issue. Food is not an issue for our people who are homeless. Food, on the other hand, is a huge issue for people who are underemployed and in their own house. People are without food, children are without food, because they're not thought of as needing meals. Unfortunately, they're the ones that we need. If we want to provide food, we have to go find them and get them food. Again, case management. We provide housing vouchers and referrals, including permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is housing that comes with mental health care. And it is indeed permanent. The problem we're running into now is we have people who have Section 8 vouchers and permanent supportive housing vouchers and can't use them. Either there's no housing available, or landlords no longer want to do Section 8, or there's no place that landlords will accept the rent that the programs have available, that these vouchers have. We provide assistance in getting birth certificates of picture IDs. The PAT team now has a notary, which is a huge plus for us, and that speeds things up significantly. We provide transportation assistance, security deposits. The least of these ministries has a warming bus, which in the cold weather gets people off the street just to stay in the bus and get warm. They also provide showers, laundry, and various supplies. Several programs provide furniture and household supplies. Very often women who are leaving Turning Point and going into an apartment are going with nothing. So if you're downsizing and you've got furniture you don't need, call Salvation Army and see if there's a lady who's on her way to an apartment. They might be able to use this. So we provide a significant amount within our ability, our ability to do so. Having to speed up a bit. One of the things I point out to people in the community, the Interagency Council's guiding principles, and certainly the mood across the country is in line with these also, is to prioritize the most vulnerable. And we do this by folks who come to us for services are assessed, and we have a by name list, and you are on that list according to what you need and when. And we want to give those people who are the most fragile, first crack at what we do have. We also want to have programs that are low barrier. The notion that just because you're using an illegal substance or are an alcoholic does not mean that you should not be part of a program. Sometimes the first step is getting housing and then dealing with the other issues. Think how hard it is, how hard it would be to deal with a substance abuse or mental health issue on the street as opposed to being in a place that's your own. We have a housing first orientation. Again, that's a low barrier approach. Give someone housing and then we'll start worrying about how to fix all the other problems. We want to be person-centered. We have, again, standardized access and assessment. We are inclusive and we are informed by local planning. I only have just a minute or two. We have had successes. Part of that is we collect an enormous amount of data through the Homeless Management Information System. Everyone who is part of, who receives any services related to homelessness is part of this system. And it shows what they needed, where they went, when they went. And it's not Big Brother, but it keeps us from duplicating services. And it also allows us to send people to the appropriate services. because all of those services are part of this HMIS system. The Council of Community Services is the home of our HMIS system. They are our community planning agency. 100% of our shelter beds are in HMIS, all of our rapid rehousing projects, the permanent supportive housing, they're all in this system. This meant a huge success for us some years ago. The VA hospital was also part of HMIS, which was a huge, wow, that was real difficult, but we have them. So we can track the VASH vouchers, which are also housing vouchers for veterans. And our system allows us to be flexible. These, I showed you pictures of people under bridges and people with terrible health conditions, but these are folks who are successes. These are pictures of folks going into their, a couple of them holding up the keys to their new apartment. We have been able to house a lot of people just during COVID. As I mentioned, we housed 99 people who were part of our COVID program. So it sounds grim, but it's not all grim at all. And I'll end that. I have a handout for you all. And I mentioned this to Christine. Very often I'm asked, people will come and say, well, there was this fellow or this woman who's standing out by Towers, and I know you know when you leave Towers, who has a sign and it's very sad and they have a dog, and should we give them money? And my answer to that is no. First of all, you don't know that they are really homeless. There are a lot of folks who find this a fairly lucrative way to get money. But the other thing is we have programs that can help them. And what I'm going to give or leave here are the list of all of our resources. This is a little pocket size thing with all this, and I didn't have enough of them. So I glued it all to a piece of paper and Xeroxed it. So this way, if you have someone who is having issues, is in danger of becoming homeless, we have resources for them, and you can send them there. But if you want to do something, here are the people you need to support. They're the ones that are out there doing this work. They're the ones that know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. So support these folks. I cannot emphasize that enough. Our programs, the folks who work on this in the services do an awesome job. I have a minute. If you have any questions, quick questions, yes, sir.
Well, a quick question, the answer stuff. How do we address this affordable housing phenomenon, and particularly for those who interact with the criminal justice system? There are several different ways of looking at it. One is if you live in a neighborhood that wants to put a multifamily, to turn an old house into a multifamily house, don't go lobby the planning commission against that, because those are often can be affordable. I don't know if you're Isabel Thornton, restoration housing has been really big, using historic tax credits to make affordable rental housing for folks. She can only do one project at a time, but one thing you can do is not oppose them. The other is if there's developers out there who want to build affordable housing, encourage them. People don't want to build the affordable housing units. Why would they want to do that if there's no money in it or something?
And that's their argument.
And what's the answer?
I wish if I had it, I'd have the answer. I know that sounds, I don't know, it's a very thorny issue. There are a lot of programs though that would be much more doable with let's say public municipal government support.
some that may be subsidized by grants, through nonprofits. There are ways to do it where the profit motive is not the issue. Where you can put capitalism aside and say, okay, we need to, as a city, prioritize, we are only going to approve these housing developments, and we are going to support them with this grant money. That would be how, and the public can raise their hand and say, we want you, city government, to do this. Show up at City Hall and say, yo, we need more housing. We are willing to support this. Yes, sir.
What do you consider the most common stereotypes you see that people have toward the homeless population?
That they're lazy and they don't want to work and they just want a handout. I wish I had the statistic with me right off the top of my head, but a significant number of people who are staying at the Mission go to work every morning. It is a lot easier to be middle class than it is to be poor. It is hard work to be poor. These are not lazy people. Think about if you had to move your residence every night and carry all your belongings with you and find a bathroom. If you're a woman, men have trees. Which is one of the reasons there's feelings against it. Yes.
That is the best way to deal with, it seems to be more and more and more people on the corner with their signs. Anything will help on this.
Is not to support that activity.
But how do we deal with, I mean, I usually stop and chat with them. Are these people that cannot work or don't want to work or?
It could be all of
One
them,
person said, this is my job, you know.
and I that's my case. I
It puts so much guilt on you just to ride by.
do not feel, I drive by these same people that you're driving by every day, and I do not feel guilty. And homelessness is my big issue. I lay awake at night worried about people who are homeless. I am not worried about them.
And you just don't think they want to get a job.
Well, part of it may be jobs that they can't get. The other part may be the jobs don't pay enough to bother getting a job. There are all sorts of reasons why people aren't working. Their mental health issues may be a barrier. Their substance abuse issues may be a barrier, but there are programs that deal with those things. And as I say, most of the folks who are asking you for money, and especially the one that said that was their job, I'm sorry, tell them to call 211, they'll get whatever assistance they need.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Dr. Paula. I will tell you, there's a part 2 to this discussion. In fact, I mean, this is the first of 3 weeks that we'll be talking about homelessness here in Roanoke, but immediately after the 10 o'clock, we're regathering with Dr. Paula Prince. Those who are involved in community engagement work already here at St. John's, and all of you are invited to attend as well. If you're interested in this issue, if you're interested in understanding what St. John's approach can be, then I encourage you to come back and let's continue the conversation. So thank you very much.